Good evening, everybody. I am Lloyd Auerbach, also known as Professor Paranormal. Welcome again to another episode of Ask Professor Paranormal. I want to welcome anyone who's new, and anyone, whether you're watching this live or watching a recording. And of course, I have some regulars, and I'm glad to see that some folks are here. Hello, Patrick. Good to see you. Well, tonight, of course, as always, I'll be answering your questions about psychic experience, the paranormal, related stuff. You might even ask me questions about chocolate. There's a reason for that. If you want to ask me about that, I think some people already know that. And then, of course, along with that, in looking at parapsychology in general, research and everything else, whatever questions you have. So let me start out by first going over the classes that are starting this week at the Rhine Education Center. There's still room in our field investigations class that's looking at apparitions, hauntings, and poltergeists. I'll be teaching that on Tuesday nights. And then on Wednesday nights, I'll be teaching a class called Dreams and Altered States of Consciousness. Those are both starting this coming week, so February 6th and 7th. In March, I'm teaching a 4-week class looking at paranormal tech on Monday nights. So if you go to rhineedu.org, of course, the link is in the description of this channel. Please take a look at the class descriptions. There are other classes, including one on energy healing and psychokinesis by John Kruth, who's the executive director of the Rhine Research Center. The other thing, just a reminder, I know some people are asking for this because I've had people ask me when it's coming, but sometime the next week or so, you will see the Kindle edition of this book up. This is the new edition. It's a second edition, slightly revised, slightly added to. I certainly have updated some things on it, of my book, A Paranormal Casebook. It is available in paperback. It should now, I haven't checked, but it should now be available on all most online booksellers. But I publish it through Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon, of course. So I do better if you get it from Amazon. If you are interested, as some people have asked, in an autographed copy, I do sell autographed copies directly from me. You just need to email me, and we can talk about it. It's the cost of the book plus postage, essentially. So let me know my email address. Again, there's an email address in the description of the channel, or you can just simply email askprofparanormal@gmail.com. That's the easiest thing, or just profparanormal@gmail.com. And I see a lot of folks there that I recognize: Jody, Paul, Elise, Tina, Sandra, hi. Pete, good to see you there. Debbie Nichols, some of my former students and recent students. Good to see people here. Thanks for joining us tonight. So before I did have somebody send me a topic to talk about. So before I get to that, I'll just see if there's any initial questions that people might have about anything that we can talk about, or even topics that you're interested in. So if somebody wants to pop something in, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and talk about this. Actually, I have 2 topics I can talk about a little bit tonight. All right. So interestingly, I've just mentioned, let everybody know, this is on a slight delay. So I think it's about 20 seconds or so behind when I'm talking. So I'm going to wait for the 49ers next Sunday. I guess living in the Bay Area, that's a relevant question, but to be very honest, I really don't care. I am not a football fan, even though I grew up in and around sports. My dad was a sports producer for NBC, and then he also produced stuff after he left NBC, mainly sporting events. So I actually worked some football games in the Chicago area when I was a student at Northwestern, when NBC was in town. I also worked baseball quite a bit because my dad produced the Game of the Week, or was one of the folks who did the Game of the Week for NBC. So I worked some of those games as a gopher on both sides, and grew up around professional athletes, even though we were not real big football fans. So I might watch the commercials later on. That's probably what, and the halftime thing. My thoughts on basic equipment required to investigate. Okay. The only thing that's required is some way to record people's interviews. It could be audio, could be video, a camera to take photographs of the environment so that you have something to work off of, some way to write things down and possibly even to draw a floor plan. Those are the only things required for an investigation. Now, add to that any environmental sensors. Of course, a thermometer, temperature sensor is good if you're using it properly. If temperature changes are something that relates to the phenomena, EMF meters are good. If you're looking for possible changes in the environment in relation to the people's experiences, but you got to look for the things that normally set those devices off. So it's really the recording devices that are most important, because you have to interview witnesses, figure out where things are going on in the place. And you do that with photo, you do that with video, you do that with audio recording. I use a digital recorder when I'm interviewing people, but I've often used video too to record the interviews with folks. That's really what's required. If you have a psychic or a good practitioner with some psychic ability, that's also helpful. But it's really about interviewing skills that's the most important thing here. Oh, Tina, here you're coming out to the Journey Within. So the Journey Within is an organization, a spiritualist organization in New Jersey that is currently run by my good friend, Joe Scheel, who is one of the mediums for the Forever Family Foundation. And Joe's a great guy. I did something with him at Lilydale, actually, a few years ago. And just waiting right now to schedule some virtual sessions, virtual presentations or classes for the Journey Within that'll be on their website. And hopefully this September, Joe's going to bring me out to do a workshop there as well. So I'll be in New Jersey and probably in New York as well, visiting family too. So it looks like September. That's what I think he's shooting for. Okay. Paul, Ozzy Osbourne's son Jack hosts a show called Portholes to Hell. Have you seen it? No, I have not. He was on a TV show too. I mean, he and his Ozzy's daughter also. So his sister was on. Sharon is somewhat interested in the paranormal as well. Honestly, I have a hard time watching any of those shows, and especially I'm going to have a hard time watching a show called Portholes to Hell, just simply because even the title just turns me off right off the bat. Hi, Kathy. Good to see you here. All right. So, Jody, going back to the equipment thing, the course I'm teaching in March, which is a 4-week class, looking at how one would use any form of technology, including electronic technology, in conjunction with the interviewing process, and looking at whether or not what these devices actually do and how to assess things for usefulness. I would love to be at New York Comic Con, but I don't think Joe's going to have me there anywhere near time for that. I, however, was at a comic book convention today. We have an East Bay comic book convention, which is actually over now. It was only one day. And pretty good dealer's room, bought a few things, sat through a Q&A with Barry Bostwick. So for those who may not know off the top of your head who that is, he's Brad in Rocky Horror Picture Show. And he did a lot of other movies and TV. Most recent TV series he did was called Spin City with Michael J. Fox, and later Charlie Sheen. But it was fun. It was fun, and I spent a little money on some things as well. So as I normally do at these conventions. Okay. That was a quick little thing here. I want to just simply mention a couple things. So I've got 2 topics to talk about that have been sent to me. One is from a woman who has been asking me a slew of questions about the evidence that we've got in our field, and especially how the skeptics look at it. And more recently, the most recent questions I had was, what are skeptics? I don't want to say explanations. I want to say excuses for a good medium, for the kinds of information that comes through, essentially an evidential medium or a good medium. Too much of what is out there. The sad thing actually is that some of what the skeptics say has truth to it. And what that means is they say that psychics are phonies, mediums are phonies. The answer is not all psychics are phonies, not all mediums are phonies, but there are phonies. There are not only phonies who are intentionally conning people, and they do that in a number of different ways. One of which, and this has been going on since the early days of spiritualism. So one of the ways that they will convince you that they're psychic is something called cold reading, which is using generalizations, but also observations and fishing for information. And there are some issues with memory and timing that are important. Cold reading is not as simple as many of the skeptics seem to think it is. We have a whole literature in the world of magic and mentalism on cold reading, and a lot of books and workshops and things like that. It can be a very complicated thing, and it can also be very, very simple. It doesn't take much to convince somebody you're psychic. A lot of it is confidence, a lot of it is personality, a lot of it is the information you're starting with, and their own expectations. Because if you tell them what they want to hear, that's enough a lot of times. There are some people who talk about hot readings. So cold reading, the idea of a cold reading is you read a person cold. Salespeople do this all the time. A lot of other professions do this. They assess people. We even do this. Honestly, everybody does a little bit of cold reading. We make judgment calls about people. We make some assumptions in our heads, very often wrong, but we make those assumptions constantly. The thing is that if you're a good observer of people, consciously or unconsciously, you can make some really good conclusions about people that are absolutely true, even though they may be true for a lot of other people too. And Tina, you're absolutely right. There are deceptive practitioners in every industry, in medical industry, in the judicial field, the lawyer, legal field. We're seeing that right now playing out on the political level playing field for certain lawsuits that are going on and court cases. There are frauds and cons in every single field. Investment fraud, financial fraud, all of that stuff, okay? It's somewhat easy to do the psychic thing, unfortunately, because there are people who want to believe in just about anything. So the cold reading thing is reading people cold and being a good observer. So a good example in literature of the ultimate cold reader would be somebody like Sherlock Holmes, who could tell you where you lived, what neighborhood you lived in London, based on the lint in your pocket, the dirt on your shoes, and maybe the coins you have as well. That's taken it a little bit far, actually. Hot reading is something that the skeptics love to go to, because they claim that these mediums and psychics who you're booking with online, you give them a credit card to hold the date and time, the appointment, which is not always the case. You don't always do that. Or at least you give them your name, and then they start looking you up on the internet and pulling all sorts of information about you, and they use that. Two problems with that. Number one, that's not what's going on for most of the real practitioners, because they really don't even see their appointment list log. A lot of them don't even see their appointment log. It's all an automatic process, or maybe they have an assistant taking care of that. It only becomes an issue with the credit card at the time that you've got the appointment, or if you miss the appointment, if there's not, a refund policy, things like that. But more importantly is that factual, plain facts that you get from public records, from doing that deep dive research based on the name and the connection to the credit card number. First of all, you have to pay, and you have to either pay someone to do the research for you with public records, or you have to acknowledge certain things. There's certain things you have to acknowledge when you use any of the public record stuff these days. It was a lot easier in the early days of public records coming online. It's very difficult these days. And if someone was using information that way, it wouldn't take much to be caught, actually. But more importantly, so I know the neighborhood you live in. I know this. I might even get a picture of your house from Google Earth, and that factual information could convince you that I'm psychic and picking up on things. But going forward, the kinds of things people want to know about, some deep issues in their lives and stuff, that has nothing to do with the factual information. That does nothing to do with the hot reading. It has much more to do with a person assessing another person or pulling information about their personality, about issues that are happening in their lives. And in cold reading, one of the things people do is they listen. So I say something like, I sense a female, there's female energy around you. Now, if I'm going for mediumship stuff, I'm going to say there's a female spirit around you. Do you have and the person will often volunteer, yes, that's my sister, she just died, or that's my mother. Now, if you were a reader, you're going to go off that. You're going to work with that, and you're going to keep playing with that. The idea is if you listen to people and what they say, and then what happens later on, somebody will often say something in reaction to a statement, a general statement, and there's a reason why general statements are used. Is because they're good for everybody, but that doesn't mean they're not true. So saying someone is indecisive or is having a hard time making a decision is true, but it's also a generalization when somebody comes to see a psychic. So whether that was simply used as a generalization or you were exuding that as the client is, psychically putting that out there, it's kind of hard to separate that out. And as one psychic I was talking to said, if the person's nodding their head, I have to use that information because I'm visually seeing it. It's not a psychic confirmation. It's an actual confirmation of something I just said. And then working through that, trying to focus. Genuine psychics pick up information that just doesn't fit with the deep dive research a person could do, except these days, for the average client, unless the psychic is well enough off, in other words, rich enough or getting enough money for their readings, to hire someone to do all the research on social media, that's actually a bigger problem than public records and factual information about somebody. Because you can glean a lot about a person's personality from what they post on Facebook, especially if they're using TikTok and things like that. But these folks don't have time to do that. So they'd have to have somebody doing it for them and then summarizing for the person who has got the appointment and such. And that is highly unlikely for so many different reasons. So that's, put all that aside. Psychics and mediums who are good get information that provides you with insight. One thing I usually tell people when they ask me, I've taught a course on how to choose a psychic or medium, both for readings, how to assess a reading, and most importantly, if you're an investigator, how to assess a psychic or medium for investigations. And it comes down to this. Did the reading provide you with clarity on whatever it is you're there for? Was the information provided in the reading useful to you in some way, or was it just entertaining? So if I go for a reading, let's say there's a tarot card reader on the street and I stop by and pay my $15 for that, that's going to be entertainment. I have gone to a couple of practitioners at psychic fairs just for entertainment because they seemed like they would be entertaining, and they were. If I'm going to get clarity about issues for my life, I want useful information. I don't want, just them to tell me all about my personality and my life. I want them to give me information about why I'm there. Part of that, however, which is from the psychic side, can be difficult because there are certain reasons why people see psychics, and different reasons for mediumship. You see a psychic because you have a financial or work-related issue. So money or work, love, relationship, and the other one is health. Those are the major reasons people show up. If people have talked about getting a bad psychic reading because the reader, the psychic, told them all about stuff related to their work, but they wanted to know about their health. And when people have told me this, I said, did you ask them, was the information about your work correct? And they said, yes. So that's not a bad reading. That is a reading that you should have started out by saying, I'm here to talk about my health. And of course, people don't want to give that away because they think they're giving something away. What they're doing by saying that is saying why you're there focuses the psychic or allows the psychic to focus. And psychics who don't ask that up front with an explanation are missing the boat. So that's that's a big piece of it. There should be useful information. Now, useful information and advice can come from a cold reader. You can get really bad advice from a person who's genuinely psychic, and you can get really good advice from a cold reader. Really good insight. So just know that there's both that can happen. With mediumship, it's a little different because the medium is ostensibly talking to another individual, not just getting information. So the factual information that comes through should not be the only thing. It should be a sense of them having a talk that they're actually communicating with someone. There should be more personality stuff. The evidence they offer should be about common things that your deceased relative or loved one would, their behaviors, their things that they normally said, the things that they normally ate, their habits and things like that. All of that should come through, which is, again, not something that's going to be easy to figure out unless these are people who happen to have been on social media a lot. Again, the medium has people who are doing the research for them. So skeptics, when I say skeptic, I'm really not talking about a skeptic. I'm talking about a pseudo-skeptic or a disbeliever who would write it off right away. They tend to come up with all sorts of explanations for psychic experiences. Most of the time, they're echoing better-known people who identify as skeptics. So they're really echoing people who are kind of the expert skeptics, you might say. And it boils down to these folks needing to have an explanation other than the possibility of psychic experience. And that's because of belief and often because of faith. So, or dogma that they've got. So I really, when I actually, because I'm also in the world of mentalism myself, when I work with people who tell me or meet people who call themselves skeptics, some people are truly skeptical, which is good, middle of the road. But then the people who are really kind of wearing the S as a big Superman S on their chest, are real proud of being skeptics, will be often sometimes belligerent, kind of like religious fundamentalists. And these are scientific, sometimes fundamentalists, and sometimes people don't know science. Sometimes religious fundamentalists, they will not believe that any evidence is possible to convince them. So when they say, "Where's your evidence?" It's like, what evidence would be convincing to you? And sometimes they're honest and say, "Well, there isn't any." It's like, okay, then it doesn't matter what I have or what my field has. You're not going to believe it anyway. If it's an experiment, a well-controlled experiment with a medium, we've heard skeptics say, well, there's something obviously wrong with the controls, even though they're reporting the design is correct, or seems to be good, but there's something else going on, or somebody's cheating, or something else is going on. There's just no way to get around it. All right. Anyway, that's a little bit of a diatribe. A good skeptic challenges you and examines the evidence and brings up issues that are potentially correct, ways to actually, things that we have to work towards eliminating as other possibilities. I've gotten asked by ghost hunters sometimes, how come parapsychologists spend so much time doing research on ESP and psychokinesis and all these controls? It's like, because that's science. Just like when we do investigations from a scientific perspective, we not only look at an entire case, what people are reporting, but I ask them to start writing down whatever individual things they've witnessed or experienced, whatever they can recall in the past, and anything going forward until perhaps we get involved with directly, physically in the investigation. And then we go through every one of those reports, those events, because you can have a case with a genuine ghost, an apparition, and still have all sorts of things people thought had something to do with the apparition that actually had normal explanations. And the only way we can study ESP is to eliminate all possible sensory information or any sort of sensory anything. Also eliminating logical, illogical, intuitive guesses. All of that. We have to eliminate that. In the field, doing investigations, we have to eliminate the non-paranormal so we have something to work with that we would call psychic or paranormal. How do genuine mediums receive information? Do they feel like talking to living people or like downloading information? Generally, it is more like having a communication or being shown something by, there are mediums who talk about being shown things like almost like charades. The spirits work with them playing charades, or they show symbols, or they talk directly. Some mediums get verbals, really direct verbals, and they can often get get names, not just it sounds like something. There are others that have a combination of sensory inputs, which may include a sense of presence, that they're feeling the spirit is there. They may actually smell certain things. I'm getting a smell of roses. Did your mom like roses? Now, that's not an uncommon thing. But then the medium would add to that in some way with the other information. So it can be in a variety of different ways. The downloading information thing is that's more about psychics doing readings of living people or picking up information from the environment, like remote viewing, or doing psychometry where you're holding an object and getting information about it. There are some mediums I work with or have worked with through the Forever Family Foundation. Also, my good friend Ankasha Amenti, who's a psychic and medium. They can do both, mediumship and psychic readings, and they are different. They're different experiences for them. Not all mediums can read living people. Not all psychics can talk to dead people. And what's interesting is there have been brain studies where a medium who's capable of psychic readings of living people and mediumistic communication, different parts of their brain lit up. So there's different in brain waves and different parts of the brain lighting up when they're doing each of those different tasks. And also different than having a communication, just having a conversation with a living person. So it's a really interesting thing we're seeing in the brain, and so on. Okay, how do you experimentally, scientifically test mediums? Okay, the best experiment or experiment series, and there are others who are kind of starting to follow this as well, or come close to it, is the Windbridge Research Center. That's windbridge.org. They have, for the last several years, been doing an experiment with multi-levels of what's called blindness in the study. So one of the problems with psychic information or testing that is if I am going to test you for whatever, psychic anything, and I know the answers, like I'm holding up a card or I know the answers to something, I might, through nonverbal cues, give you the answer. You might be able to unconsciously pick up things from me. Or if I'm testing a medium, the person who's the sitter who's getting the reading in the room with the medium may be giving information away non-verbally, but also giving information away psychically, telepathically that way. So actually in the 19th century, they started using proxy sitters. So the scientist would send not the client who wants the reading, they send somebody else who didn't know the client to represent, or to even did know the client to represent that client to the medium, who would then communicate with the spirit and would just be communicated back to the client. So at Windbridge, picture if you will, there are 19 currently research certified mediums at Windbridge. They went through a 1-year program to make sure they could do, under controlled conditions, what they claim to be able to communicate, somehow get information from deceased people. The researcher assigns a particular sitter. So they have volunteer sitters, people who have had someone who died not too long ago. And so let's say that sitter's name is Bob. And Bob wants to communicate or has a late sister named Sally. Okay, so Sally is who Bob would like to communicate with. All right, so the experimenter knows both parts of this. She then tells Bob, she assigns a time for a particular medium. She randomly chooses one of the research mediums, make sure that person's available, what their schedule is. She then assigns a time for the reading, for the medium to do the reading, to try to communicate with Sally. Let's say it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. And she tells Bob that between now and tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'd like you to think about Sally and mentally tell Sally that a medium is going to try to reach out to her at 2 p.m. tomorrow. The researcher then contacts another researcher, gives one name to that researcher besides the name of the medium. That name is Sally. That's the only thing that that researcher tells that other researcher, the one who's going to actually make the call. Now, the main researcher has gathered information from Bob about Sally as well. All right, just so she has some basic data. She has not communicated that to the other researcher. That second researcher now knows the time of the reading and who the medium is. At 2 p.m. tomorrow, that second researcher will call the medium or be called by the medium, will then say to the medium, you're supposed to contact a spirit or get contact from a spirit named Sally. The medium then does the reading. It is recorded. It is transcribed. The transcription is taken back to the main researcher who provides it to the sitter along, often, depending on the experiment, it may be provided with 3 or 4 other readings of women who are deceased of a similar age range as Sally was when she died, maybe even similar reason she died. If it's the multi-reading given to the sitter, to Bob, Bob would have to go through them all, determine which one he ranks the best, and then also rank each of the statements that are made, like from 1 to 100. This is true, this is sort of true, it fits other people, that kind of thing. If it's a single reading, he has to go through that and score that very carefully. All right. The main researcher may also assign a judge, give that judge all the information that was given to her by Bob, and give, again, those other readings to the judge and have the reading have them go through all that. So it's a process by which essentially the medium knows nothing more than a first name, and the sitter is the ultimate, in some respects, the judge of what happened, that and the factual information gathered. So all of that is really important. And the mediums have done very well at that. The research certified mediums have done very well at that, often coming up with information that they could not possibly have known about that person who has passed away, about specific relevant communications that have come through as well. In a lesser controlled situation, you have a medium doing a reading for someone who has been trained to give no reaction whatsoever, other than possibly, and may even be only on the phone, other than a yes or no to each statement. That's true, that's not true, that kind of thing. And then those are ranked by independent judges, again, along with other readings as well. So we try to do that as much as possible. Let's see. So the one thing I have to say is within the field of parapsychology, the question comes up as to whether the medium is truly communicating with someone, another consciousness, or if the medium is actually just a really, really amazing psychic using something we often call super psi or super ESP. That's beyond the normal psychic reading. And in the mind of the medium, the unconscious of the medium, as they get the information, they are processing it as if they're talking to someone instead of just getting information from the sitter or wherever they are, that kind of thing. So there's folks in the field of parapsychology who are more materialists, and they don't believe necessarily, they don't look at the evidence through a lens that would suggest that it's life after death, it's survival of bodily death, but it's still ESP in that sense. Elise, I recently watched the Afterlife Investigation on Tubi. What do you think of this about the Skull Experimental Group? I'm in that one. So I think I said what I meant there. I think that the skull work that was done by that group, a group of scientists doing research, again, very well controlled. They had a lot of physical phenomena happening. Assuming that all those scientists were on the up and up, which I believe they were, don't know if they were communicating with someone or if it was, again, ESP or even because they weren't getting factual information. They were having physical stuff, getting advice from deceased scientists. That could have been a combination effect because they also had the physical things happening, which actually could have been their own unconscious psychokinesis. We see that in some physical mediumship stuff. How do you become a trained sitter for the Family Foundation? Actually, the training process is something that Bob Ginsberg, our who is the vice president of the foundation and one of our founders, he does the training along with a couple of other folks, and it is really getting people to understand how not to react to anything. More importantly, how to keep yourself from saying anything, because that's a tough thing for people to learn. And they run through some practice stuff to make sure that they're not giving anything away. And more importantly, they're also taught how to rank and judge any of the readings that they get back. So it is a bit of a process. Wouldn't the middle medium have to get information about Sally after booking the psychic? Proximity wouldn't affect the passage of information. Well, there's no medium in between. There's a researcher. The medium does not need to get any information about, the medium is doing the reading or communication with Sally, doesn't seem to need to get any information, because Sally has been warned or informed by Bob that she should pay attention when a medium tries to contact her. That's one of the things we see quite often, is that with mediums, if you are going for a mediumistic reading, for a reading from a medium, and you want to communicate with someone who's deceased, you should mentally think of that person and be putting the word out. I'm going to see a medium, Dad. Please be available tomorrow when my appointment's at 1 o'clock. Can you please be available? Now, that doesn't mean that my dad would be available at 1 o'clock tomorrow. He might be doing something else. And one of the things we see happen in the group sessions, especially, although happens with one-on-ones we hear as well, for the Forever Family Foundation events, is that a person will have wanted to talk to their mother, and both parents are deceased, and the father comes through. I saw one very contentious situation at one of the foundation events a few years ago, where the father comes through. This is one of the circumstances where the father comes through. She wanted to talk to her mother, and she didn't want to talk to her. So a father starts coming through, and the woman says, yeah, that's my father, but I don't want to talk to my father. We never got along. I want to talk to my mother. And the medium listens for a moment and says, your father says your mother's not available, and right now he wants to talk to you and clear the air about things. So people often, we've seen some bad reviews of some of the mediums, and what really it turns out is either this is with our group events, they didn't get a reading, so they gave a bad review, which is ridiculous, because a medium can't hit everybody, because maybe not everybody's family spirits want to come through. And number two, the wrong person came through. It's not dial a spirit. But as much as possible, if you mentally try to bring this person to you, the medium will pick up on that and be able to pick up that person. It's like sending a text saying, I'm going to call you in a half an hour. Please be available. That's the best way I can put it. And the reason why someone might not be available is we have no idea what's like in the spirit world. It may be the person who does come through, even though you don't want to talk to them, they have to communicate with you. It also is similar to calling a household. It's different now with cell phones, but calling a landline, and you want to talk to someone in the house, and he or she's not home. You want to talk to the person who picked up the phone? No? Okay. That's it. So it's not that easy. Is the Watsika Wonder a well-documented case? I think I think there's, as far as I know, there's only one book called Watsika. I have a copy of the book. I haven't read that book, God, since my teenage years. I think that when you write up a book for the public, there are going to be things, because I know this in my own situation, there are going to be things that you change for reasons of confidentiality. You may leave things out. So typically you try not to exaggerate. I don't know how well that's been how much that's been exaggerated. I haven't really looked into the actual story, just obviously what's in the book. Okay, it sounds like replacement reincarnation Dr. Stevenson cases. I assume, the Watsika Wonder. Yeah, sometimes that's called a walk-in. There haven't been, we actually had a recent discussion about this on our e-group of colleagues, and there are those cases that seem that the personality of the past personality kind of takes over. but it's hard to determine whether that's truly, without going into really good historical factual research, whether that is some kind of spirit replacement or personality replacement, or it's just some form of dissociative identity disorder. A little tough. Okay, so Susanna, my point was the information passed to the researcher by Bob. Well, there was no information passed to the researcher who was talking on the phone with the medium. That individual, you know, was not passed on because that second researcher, who was the only one in contact with the medium at that point, had no knowledge of anything other than the name of the medium to call and the name Sally. That was it. Didn't even know Bob's name. So the idea is to try to remove anything but that single first name and hope that a Sally gets contacted. So I can mention one other thing related to this, which is I don't think it's happening much today, but in some of the earlier research that Julie Beischel has done, and even before that with Gary Schwartz, there was an author named Susie Smith who wrote a huge number of books on parapsychology, the paranormal, psychic things in the 60s and 70s. And Gary Schwartz, who is the senior researcher in the Human Energy Laboratory at University of Arizona, he's the one who kind of kickstarted the mediumship research in the laboratory. He had a really close relationship with Susie Smith before she died. He used to call her his adopted grandmother. And after she died, apparently Susie was seen at the desk, the reception desk, when there was no one there, by visitors coming to the lab. They would describe her. She was there like to greet people every once in a while. So push that aside for a minute. Susie, at least in the early experiments with Julie Beischel and others, has kind of done drop-ins where besides Sally, all of a sudden there's someone named Susie there and there's a message given to the researcher. And sometimes it was done where Susie, the mental word was put out. There were random times or random readings and mediums to assign Susie to show up and drop in. And that did happen, apparently, more than a few times. Okay, Jimmy, Ruth Montgomery reported walk-ins as a special spirits acting purposely with the consent of the person replaced, while Stevenson's cases were random and involuntary. Yeah, and that is true. But the thing is that while we can separate the two, the general public tends to call them all walk-ins for the most part. And I've only met one person who was a walk-in in my life, but the walk-in spirit was supposedly the spirit of a being from the Andromeda Galaxy. I had a hard time with that one. Let's put it that way. Okay. Let me move on to another topic. This has gone pretty fast, which is good. I just want to mention that this is a question that came up with someone in Eastern Europe who I communicate with. And he was asking about cases of dematerialization and rematerialization and apports. You know, an apport in spiritualist tradition is a physical thing that shows up. So in the middle of a physical mediumship session, something drops from the ceiling. It's something that is unusual. It may relate to someone in the room. It could be something else that's physical. There was a mystic by the name of Sai Baba, who was well investigated by Erlander Haraldson and Carlos Sosis, including and they had consultation with Doug Henning, the magician, and other magicians about this. But Sai Baba could manifest gold and actually some semi-precious gems and things like that, and gave them away. So whether that really happened, Osis and Haraldson, I talked to both of them about this, and there was a book about Sai Baba. There's many books about Sai Baba, but it seemed to be some real, at least sometimes real phenomena. Teleportation has been reported in a few cases. So that would be a dematerialization of something one place and a rematerialization somewhere else. Okay, that's teleportation. It's not like the effect we see on the transporter on Star Trek or Transmet on Doctor Who. but it is an object disappears and then reappears elsewhere. And there is a book that I recommend called Jot, Jott, by Mary Rose Barrington, a British researcher who has passed away. Um, it's an interesting book because it looks at a very common phenomena that we've all experienced. And that is, I'm going to go out one day and I'm looking for my car keys and I know I put them on the counter. And in fact, other people saw me put them on the counter and they're not on the counter anymore and nobody's moved them. And I get really frustrated and I run around trying to find them and I go back and look and there they are in the counter. The disappearance and reappearance of things, or that they reappear somewhere else. It's really frustrating when these things happen to us. I've known many people who had these experiences. I've had a few of these myself. I know psychics who have had these experiences. And the best we can figure out is that there's something about our unconscious, if it's a psychic thing and not a memory thing, that's important, okay? Then, and not a trick being played on us by someone else. If it's a psychic thing, then our psychokinetic abilities kind of kick in and move them. Whether they move them or make them disappear and then reappear, sometimes in other places, is hard to say. But that would be an unconscious thing. And the reason that my unconscious would have done that to me is because I shouldn't go out at that point. There's a reason why I shouldn't be driving at that point. So it's kind of tough to say, but Jot is all about those minor PK effects that can be very frustrating for people. And, you know, it's always interesting when that happens, and people also remember where you put things. And even so, you put them on this coffee table, and everybody's standing around looking at the coffee table, and you all turn away for a minute or go into another room. Everybody comes back in, and there they are on the coffee table, and no one saw them on the coffee table. So if it was just you, it could be what's called a negative hallucination, where you don't see something that actually is for unconscious reasons. But when you got other people, it's a different thing altogether. Right? And Jot, it does stand, Jody, for just one of those things. It's my favorite technical term as well. I think I don't know for sure that it was come up because it just seems like something they would have talked about on Monty Python. All right. Do I have a favorite investigator, current or historical? My favorite historical investigator is Nandor Fodor. Not well portrayed, I think, by Simon Pegg and Nandor Fodor in The Talking Mongoose. But Nandor Fodor's stuff, I spent a lot of time looking at his stuff and connecting with the family, a representative of the Fodor family. And he's just a really cool guy. And everything I've read by him is really, really interesting. And he's also kind of the grandfather of the poltergeist as psychokinesis of living people. Bill Roll's considered the father of that model, but certainly Fodor was kind of the person who conceived it all. Current, I don't have any particular favorites necessarily, although I will point to Steve Parsons in the UK. Steve, if you're watching this after watching the recording, Steve is a really great investigator. He is really the person you want to go to if you want to know about technology, about EVP, about video, about audio, about all that. I highly recommend and use one of his books, the book Ghostology, in my advanced field investigations class. He's also written two shorter books, kind of like guides. One is a guide to investigations, and the other is one of his investigation guides that focuses on how to assess technology equipment in our investigations. And he and Cal Cooper, another fun favorite parapsychologist, a friend of mine, have written a book called Paracoustics, which, if you're interested at all in EVP and any audio stuff, if you don't read that book, I don't think you're really assessing your EVPs properly. So that's who I would kind of point to. Susanna, the remote to a TV. This is right. That's right. I've known Susanna for a long time. The remote to a TV was nowhere. Came back. You left. You came back. It was teetering on top of a recliner. Those kinds of things are kind of fun. Yeah. Catherine, we are having high wind right now here in Martinez as well. So far, we're good with power outages. I'm hoping that is the case, but welcome back. And, Kat, I don't know if I have your correct email. I'd like to send you that bibliography we talked about. So if you want to just email me, it's Prof Paranormal, PROF is in Professor Paranormal at gmail.com, or ask Prof Paranormal at gmail.com. Send me your email and I'll send you that stuff that I talked about last time. Hi, Jimmy, don't be humble, be your own favorite investigator. Okay, I am my own favorite investigator. There, I said it. How's that, Jimmy? Okay. I want to mention, going back to ghostology, Steve Parson is writing, I'm just waiting for it to come out, a book called Paravision about ghost photography and video and thermal vision and all that other fun stuff. So that's going to be really an important work because he really is the go-to guy for tech. There's two people that I look to for assessing any technology that pops up in the ghost hunting world. One is Steve Parsons, Stephen T. Parsons. You'll find him on Amazon. The other is Kenny Biddle, who is a skeptic, who has also taken apart the equipment and spends a lot of time looking at what it really does, what it can do. And I will say right off the bat that yes, he is a skeptic. He's more of a middle of the road skeptic. Well, he's on the side of disbelief a little bit. More importantly, there are no devices we know of that can verifiably detect anything psychic or paranormal. So we need to know what they do so we can figure out if it's possible for them to even pick up something else. That's tough. Okay, thank you, Susanna. I appreciate that. All right, block your ability to see it. That is the negative hallucination. This is something that concept I was introduced to by Harry Blackstone Jr. years and years ago. I hadn't even thought about that. We talk about hallucinations as seeing or hearing, because there can be auditory hallucinations or even olfactory hallucinations. That's something that's not in the physical environment. Technically, when you see an apparition, that is a hallucination, but it's one with an outside source. A negative hallucination would be your perception blocks out something your eyes are actually seeing. You have to remember that the picture that you see through your eyes, or I should say through your mind, your perception is not the same as your sense of sight. Your sense of sight gets information in. Keep in mind that we have that blind spot at the back of our retina where the optic nerve touches the back of the retina, and that's a blind spot. There's no data coming in at that point. There should technically be a black spot floating around in our vision. There is not, because we get enough information to either fill it in based on scanning the environment or making an assumption, and our perception, our process fills it in for us. So a negative hallucination will be removing something visual from our vision. You could also consider negative hallucination, although this is a stretch of this. A negative auditory hallucination would be, when you're a teenager and your mom yells for you and you swear you don't hear her. Okay. That was something my brother did all the time. All right. Non-cognitive seeing. Yes, that's good. That's good too, Jimmy. All right. Any chance it could be a rerun of some old cases on TV streaming, like Tony the Bartender, and that's in Tracy, California, the old stuff from... Actually, there's quite a bit of it on YouTube. In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel called youtube.com/Lloyd Auerbach, you will see a lot of those old segments. Many of them actually are on YouTube. I have uploaded some, of course, but there are still more and more are popping up. I was looking for some of my old sightings stuff, and I did find a couple episodes from the early days of sightings on somebody's channel. All right. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Paul. That was a really good experience. There's a podcast called Beyond Greatness, and really good interview, a really good session that we did. There's another one coming up. I think I just posted it on my Facebook, my main Facebook page. I have to post it on my author page as well, and I will post it in the Lloyd Auerbach fans and students group as well. One of the mediums from the Forever Family Foundation, Kathy Nadal, did an interview with me, which is going to be released on this coming Thursday, I believe. So I'll post that somewhere along the line there as well. All right. Yeah, the blind spot, scanned info interpolated, or hallucination, AI confabulation. That's a deep question. I think the word hallucination now is carrying completely weird um, connotation to it, thanks to the AI stuff that's happening. Uh, and as working for a company that it's dealing with AI to some extent, uh, you, it's really interesting how that term has taken off in that context. That sources are hallucinated. Basically, that's really what it's talking about: is sources being hallucinated. So it's a very weird thing. I play with ChatGPT. I play with Google Bard. Google Bard has gotten a lot better, thankfully, because as of a couple months ago, my test, of course, was often to say, who is Lloyd Auerbach? And for months, there were so many errors in it. It was ridiculous. I mean, I don't even know where they got the information from, because there was information in what it came back with that I've never seen anybody. I went searching for it. I didn't think there was nobody had ever written that stuff or said it about me. And eventually got it right. But then they made up sources for articles that didn't exist. So that was pretty weird. It's changed because it's now backed by Google searching and some other things as well. All right. Did you get the video of the documentary Rethinking Death? I don't think so, Paul. I'll look again. I don't think I saw that. I would remember that title. But maybe I just missed it. It's been very, very busy for me the last couple of weeks as well. Jody, wish you could take the March class you mentioned, traveling half of that month. Well, here's the good news. The way we offer our online classes is the Rhine Research Center, the Education Center. So it's Rhine Education Center. Again, the link is in the description for the channel. I do a weekly live lecture, about an hour and a half, and then there's a half hour of discussion Q&A. That is recorded, and typically by the next night, sometimes the day after that, the recording is up and available for students. So in a typical class where I might have 20 students, I'd say that no more than 10, and possibly not even 10, join in for the discussion or even they're live. Everybody else watches the recording. The recordings then and the class materials are all available for months after you start a class. So people can go back to those recordings. People can download the audio or the recordings. It's all there. So even if you're traveling half the month, maybe you're not taking it for a grade. It's really that's a pass-fail class for people who want to take it as a grade. But maybe you're taking it for fun or for your own information, which is at least half the students. I don't grade most of the students most of the time. You can do that. You can certainly do that. Any of our classes. So again, the ones that are coming up this week, field investigations of apparitions, hauntings, and poltergeists. And the other one I'm teaching is dreams and altered states of consciousness. And then John Kruth is teaching one on energy healing and psychokinesis. Okay, new Ghostbusters movie comes out March 22nd. I'm looking forward to it. I'm mad that they changed the date. They moved it up a week. And I'm now going to be at the Oregon Ghost Conference. For those of you in the Oregon Pacific Northwest area, this is at Seaside, Oregon. It is March 22nd through the 24th. I'm going to be there the 22nd and 23rd, and part of the 24th. I am performing, going to be doing a panel with my friend Ankasha Amenti the first evening, and on a parapsychologist and a psychic working together. And then I'm performing my Professor Paranormal Psychic Mind Theater show that night. And then the next day, Ankasha and I are doing a spoon bending party. And I'll be lecturing on ghost hunting on parapsychology for ghost hunters. Ankasha does a huge gallery reading. She's a medium, so she does all that. So I encourage you if you can make that. But unfortunately, unless the movie is playing in Seaside and I can catch a late 9 show, I'm probably not going to see it till I get back, which makes me mad because I wanted to see it the first day. All right. Glad you I liked Afterlife too. All right. Thanks, everybody. Jimmy, I'm glad you're going to be there live. That's great. All right. All right. And for anybody who wants to who wants to come and visit, that'd be great. Yeah, Kat, it really is interesting that everybody immediately accepted the word hallucination for AI making things up. I don't know what else, what other term they could have used, but it's pretty funny in some respects. All right. Thanks for letting me know it won't be playing. That's bad news. Won't be playing in CSET. Okay. All right. So, yeah, and Jimmy, me too. When I met Kat years ago at the Magic Castle, found out it was the same person whose name I'd been seeing in comic book letter pages. It was pretty exciting. All right. Everybody, thank you for tonight. It's past our time. I'm going to go have some dinner, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. It's the next session. So it's going to be on the 18th of February. And come with your questions, send them in advance, and so on. Kat, yeah, you were the author and artist of Tarzan. Great. I didn't get anything that cool, unfortunately. All right. Night, everybody. Take care.